Imagine a world where fear and superstition controlled the fate of countless lives, a time when a simple accusation could end in death. For centuries, Britain was gripped by a fear of witchcraft that led to trials, torture, and executions. The stories of these witches remind us of a dark history, a history filled with haunting tales. Today we're exploring the legends, the hunts, and the fearsome figures behind the witch trials of Britain. Join us as we uncover the chilling history of the witches of Britain. In the 16th and 17th centuries, witchcraft became not only a feared phenomenon, but a crime punishable by death. What began as superstition took on the weight of law. Under King Henry VIII, Britain's first Witchcraft Act made even the suspicion of dark magic a matter of life and death. Fear didn't just spread, it took hold and it turned deadly. When James I rose to power, that fear reached new heights. A survivor of a fierce storm at sea, James was convinced that witches were out to destroy him. His obsession became a national concern, and he took it a step further by publishing Demonology, a chilling manual on witch hunting. This wasn't just superstition anymore. It was a royal decree to seek out the suspected and expose them as instruments of the devil. And with this royal mandate, the witch hunts grew darker and deadlier, driving countless innocent lives into suspicion's shadow. Witches were no longer just figures of folklore. They became threats to the very heart of the kingdom, hunted down by law, condemned by fear. And so, under royal mandates and growing paranoia, witch trials swept across Britain like wildfire. Few places would feel the effects of this more deeply than Lancashire, where one of the most infamous and chilling cases in British history would take place: the Pendle Witch Trials. Lancashire, 1612. 12 people stood accused of witchcraft, mostly from two feuding families, the Demdikes and the Chattoxes. Suspicion was rife, and long-standing rivalries fueled accusations that would turn neighbour against neighbour, sparking a frenzy that would lead to tragedy. At the centre of these accusations was a young girl named Janet Device. Just 9 years old, Janet took the stand to testify against her own family, a devastating act that would ultimately seal their fate. Her testimony was powerful enough to convince the court, and as the words left her lips, the lives of 10 people were condemned. These individuals, accused of summoning storms, casting spells, and even consorting with the devil, were sentenced to hang. The execution of the Pendle witches marked one of the darkest chapters in English witchcraft history. But their story, far from forgotten, echoes through the hills of Lancashire to this day, reminding us of the chilling power of fear and accusation. The Pendle trials showed that, in an age of suspicion, even a child's words could turn deadly. The Pendle Witch Trials had cast a dark shadow over Lancashire, but fear of witchcraft wasn't contained to just one county. Soon, another figure would emerge, taking Britain's fear of witches to horrifying new extremes. His name would become infamous: Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General. In the 1640s, during the chaos of England's Civil War, a man named Matthew Hopkins rose to power, claiming a terrifying title, the Witchfinder General. Hopkins was no king or nobleman, yet his influence spread like wildfire across East Anglia, leading to the deaths of hundreds, and leaving a trail of terror wherever he went. Hopkins had one purpose: to hunt witches. Driven by an intense zeal, he used brutal methods to identify witches. His most infamous test was the swimming test. Accused witches were tied and thrown into water. If they floated, they were deemed guilty. Another method involved searching for the devil's mark, a small blemish or mole said to be a sign of allegiance to dark forces. Hopkins exploited the instability of the time, turning neighbour against neighbour, spreading fear with each village he entered. His title was unofficial, yet his power grew as he moved through the countryside, interrogating the accused, breaking them with his merciless tests. The Witchfinder General's reach was vast, and those under suspicion knew the likelihood of a fair trial was non-existent. In the span of a few short years, Matthew Hopkins claimed hundreds of lives. Eventually, his methods became so extreme, so vicious, that even his contemporaries began to question his actions. Hopkins' influence waned, but the scars he left on East Anglia ran deep. His legacy is a chilling reminder of the dark power one man can wield in times of fear. While the Witchfinder General cast a terrifying shadow over England, the fear of witchcraft knew no borders. North of the border in Scotland, witch hunts were reaching an even more fevered pitch, driven by a figure just as powerful, King James VI. His obsession with witchcraft would ignite one of the darkest periods in Scottish history. Scotland in the late 16th century was a land gripped by fear and suspicion. Witch hunts reached unprecedented levels under the influence of King James VI, later James I of England, a monarch deeply disturbed by what he believed was a conspiracy against his own life. In 1590, after James's fleet encountered a violent storm on their return from Denmark, the king became convinced that witches had cast spells to sink his ship. Determined to root out these supposed threats, he ordered a series of brutal trials in the town of North Berwick. Over 70 people were accused, subjected to horrific torture, and forced to confess to crimes of sorcery. Among them was Agnes Sampson, known as the Wise Wife of Keith, who was singled out for her knowledge of healing and herbal remedies. Sampson, along with others, was brutally tortured. Sleep deprivation, beatings, and the infamous torture device known as the boots, designed to crush bones, were all used to extract confessions. It was a method of terror designed to bring about submission, even if it meant admitting to crimes never committed. But King James didn't stop with the trials. Obsessed with eradicating witchcraft, he authored Daemonology, a guide that would fuel witch hunts across Britain and instill fear in the hearts of his subjects. The North Berwick trials marked a turning point, unleashing a wave of witch hunts that swept across Scotland, condemning hundreds to death. James's fear became Scotland's curse, and the fires of North Berwick left a legacy of horror and loss that still haunts the country's history. While England and Scotland were consumed by fear, their neighbours in Wales and Ireland faced witchcraft with a different perspective. Though the hunts were less intense, superstition and fear still cast a long shadow, marking lives and leaving behind stories just as chilling. In Wales, where folklore and ancient traditions were deeply rooted, fear of witchcraft took on a quieter but no less sinister form. Trials were fewer, but they often carried a brutal finality. One of the most unsettling cases was that of Gwen Ellis, accused in 1594 of cursing her neighbours with what she claimed was nothing more than harmless folk magic. Gwen was condemned and executed, a tragic end for a woman who had likely practiced traditional healing. Ireland too had its share of witch trials, though they were rare. The most infamous took place in 1711 in the small coastal town of Islandmagie. Here, 8 women were accused of using supernatural powers to harm a local family. Witnesses testified to strange visions, supernatural attacks, and inexplicable disturbances. Though no solid evidence existed, the women were found guilty, marking Ireland's first and last witch trial. The Islandmagie case revealed how deeply superstition had seeped into daily life, even in places untouched by the mass hysteria of England and Scotland. In both Wales and Ireland, ancient superstitions mingled with new fears, sparking rumours and accusations that left lasting scars. The stories of Gwen Ellis and the Islandmagie women stand as reminders that no matter where you were in the British Isles, even a whisper of magic could be enough to seal your fate. From the haunting hills of Wales to the quiet shores of Ireland, the witch hunts left a lasting mark across the British Isles. But as the 17th century came to a close, the flames of these hunts began to dwindle. A new age was dawning, one that would challenge the old superstitions and finally bring an end to the fear that had claimed so many lives. By the late 17th century, a shift in thinking began to spread across Britain. The rise of the Enlightenment brought a new emphasis on reason, science, and skepticism. Scholars, scientists, and philosophers began to question the practices that had fueled the witch hunts. The mysterious was no longer feared, it was studied, analysed, and often debunked. Courtrooms, once echoing with accusations of witchcraft, started to change as well. judges and officials became increasingly reluctant to accept spectral evidence or hearsay. The tide was turning, and the courts that once condemned witches by the hundreds began to demand tangible proof, making it far more difficult to convict the accused. In 1736, a decisive law was passed. The Witchcraft Act was officially repealed, marking the end of an era. No longer would accusations of witchcraft carry the power to destroy lives. The shift was profound, yet the shadow of these hunts lingered in folklore, superstition, and haunted traditions that live on to this day. The scars left by centuries of fear and persecution remain woven into the cultural fabric of Britain. Even now, stories of witches haunt the lands, tales whispered around firesides and passed down through generations. The legacy of the witch hunts lives on as a warning, a reminder of how fear and superstition can consume even the most rational of minds. And so, Britain's dark history of witch hunts finally came to an end. Yet the echoes of those condemned still resonate. Their stories remind us of how thin the line can be between justice and fear. The stories of the witches of Britain serve as a haunting reminder of how fear can lead to unimaginable cruelty. These women and men, accused of impossible crimes, were victims of a world ruled by superstition and suspicion. The echoes of their stories linger still, woven into the folklore and traditions of the British Isles, whispered around firesides and remembered as cautionary tales. If this journey into Britain's dark history has captivated you, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and join us for more haunted histories and ancient legends from across the British Isles. And as we look back on these stories, let's remember them not only for their tragedy, but as a testament to the importance of reason over fear. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep listening to the whispers of the past.